because I loved the trip the extended summer trip. It was so cool to watch. I mean, they used great imagination. The kids looked like they were having a blast. They set up all these different cool things, and I thought that was so awesome. And, not just like your typical, ESY or whatever. It's like it looked like they had so much fun, and it was, learning but having a really good time too. So I had to jump on that.
Miss Claudia, every summer school has done a wonderful job. Last year they were attending fishing and they had their own boats.
She does too.
So yeah, and JJ had a lovely time.
He looked like he was having fun when I saw the picture.
I wanted to do a shout out to the custodial staff and the maintenance crews. So specifically, obviously they worked really, really hard during the summer to put everything back in place. They're working on the field over there at the stadium and getting our buildings ready for students to come back in the fall. But I had a personal experience this week, and it was just such an awesome little thing that I sent a note to Ed, and I'm just going to share that. I was on my way to work about 7:30 a.m., and as I'm at the cross section getting ready to head up to Graham, a district vehicle drove by me, and a white pickup. It was so clean. The guy, he was already started work for the day. He had a trailer behind him that was loaded down with all kinds of debris, clippings from the grounds, and it was tarped. There was nothing flying out of that vehicle, and I followed him all the way up the hill, and I just thought, bravo, boarding grounds crew, because it's not very often that you get behind a vehicle that's got something in it, and you're seeing things fly out, and it's hitting you, and where I work, this was a major big thing. So I just wanted to give a big old kudos to the grounds crew for the excellence that they do, and I thought it was a really big deal.
Very good.
I also want to give a shout out to Coach Fry for her volleyball.
Yes.
She coaches at the Rainier Volleyball Club, and she earned the inaugural Coach of the Year award from the Rainier Volleyball Club. My daughter Allison played volleyball for her all 4 years of high school. And Allison was a basketball player, not a volleyball player, but she loved volleyball. And so I thought it was awesome that her coach, Coach Fry, got that inaugural award. So congratulations, Coach Fry.
She puts in a lot of extra time.
She does. She's awesome.
Yes.
And I know this isn't on here, but the transportation department,
Yes.
once again, oh my goodness. And I know how hard they work all year long to take care of the buses and keep all the records straight. So we are very lucky, and we should be really thrilled that we have employees that help us so much with being good stewards of what we have.
And a shout out to all our sports teams. I could see driving through town, it seemed like every weekend somebody was doing some good car wash to help, get funds for the teams and their clubs. So and it looked like good support from our community on it also. So shout out to our community, shout out to the clubs, the teams doing it. So yeah.
Oh, very good. I'd like to recognize our teachers and all the staff involved in musical classrooms, musical chairs, to get everything set up for Ording Elementary School and PTR. That's a lot of moving pieces. Thank you to everyone helping to coordinate that work, and thanks for everybody just embracing that team spirit and patience as everyone has to pack up their spaces and move to different homes. So I know that happens in between now and the beginning of the year. So thank you. Anything else?
PTR also had a really cool end of the year celebration. Don and I grilled hamburgers for them, and they had this huge picnic, and she was giving little like awards to different teachers for different things that they've done throughout the Nikki West. So I thought it was a really good way to end the year.
Very cool. All right. Thank you, everyone. Still lots to celebrate, even though the kids are not in school. Well, except for the summer
Yeah.
kids.
It's over.
Yep,
It's over now. Right. All right. Next item is community and staff comments, and I don't believe we have any speakers today. So we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Wonderful. We'll pull that up on screen. It's been a minute since we've had a meeting, because our last official business item was graduation, so for a regular board meeting was early June, and a lot has transpired since then. We did a lot of recognition at the end of the year. That's OMS Awards Assembly, and take a look at how many students and how many families came into our school to celebrate kids. It was just a wonderful opportunity to come in and connect around our strategic work, and their staff did an amazing job recognizing kids, and they got a lot of kudos and support. Next. You might have to go manually, because I'm not getting the clicker to go, Miss Bonnie.
Okay, let me see.
You got the little mouse thing, but it's not going.
Okay. Hey, Wayne, can you come here for a second? Okay.
Seems to be frozen.
Wait, no. Okay, now try it, Ed.
Boyfriend.
Did that do it?
Nope.
No? Okay.
This looks like me at home.
Do you like the cards you want to make it?
Yeah, put it on your chin. Hey, now we're going. We're good. Is it working? It's working. Field Day, this was a wonderful experience for a couple of different reasons. One, the kids really look forward to it and have a wonderful time. But it's actually student-led. So working with our PE teacher, she taught the upper elementary students how to engage the activities, what the rules are. And so for a large part of that, it was student-led, and they just had a wonderful, wonderful time. And of course, when you see them beaming because they're in charge, taking some level of responsibility as 8-year-olds, it was really, really cool. Same with PTR, and we had a lot of family engagement on this one as well. They really filled the whole entirety of the stadium. Wonderful activities, and the pictures, we put many on social media. But look at that bubble. It's just, they were having so much fun. That was a wonderful way to wrap up the school year. There's one of our volunteers, kids doing tug of war. They just had a tremendous good time, and that backdrop now looks quite a bit different because the turf, we accepted that today, and I'll share more about that next month. Now, when you think about the elements around dignity or belonging connected to agency, imagine going back to a school that you may not have seen for 10 years, and that's the greeting that you get. So our kids really showed up, so did the staff, to recognize and celebrate our seniors with signs. Look at some of the smiles and the hugs. It was just a really cool way to send seniors off. Here we are, look at the anticipation in our kids' voice. And just the championing side, like what that feels. So when you think about how do you create a culture of belonging or connectedness or really leverage a community, that's a wonderful example of how to do so. What does that feed? There's cheering on the stage and Director Milo, and that's of course what it's about. And we hope when they get to that point and ready to go that we've really developed that ability to be empowered, set goals and achieve those goals and reach those dreams. And the culmination moment is there where they kick off the hats. Just if you have any feedback, we're happy to take that. Of course, there's questions every year, whether it's really hot or really rainy. Why here? Why there? We think we can house graduation for the next few years at least just by adding some more rows. We can go deeper with the stage and expand what you saw, the response this year, the tents over the graduates, as well as the improved sound system. I wrote a hand thank you note because the sound sounded amazing. Our kids were just tremendously echoing back in, not in a negative way, but just the way their voices lifted was incredible. But if you have any feedback as a board, I'm happy to take that, and we'll start that planning process now. Bonnie and I have already put some things on the calendar for next year in terms of certain timelines and check-ins and things like that. But we think that that's the right home for us for at least the next few years. because we can house more kids. But if you think about this year, we were about 180 kids. Just a few years from now, we think we'll be at 225, 230. That's what's coming into the high school, and that doesn't account for growth. So we'll definitely be getting bigger here over the next few. Okay.
I think from what the kids that I talk to, they like to have it there. The seniors, they like it. All of the, Mason and his friends, they think it's really cool to do it at their,
Okay.
so I mean, can't speak for everyone, but the ones that I did talk to really like having that because they say it just brings back all kinds of different memories that they've done there. So, it's not about being the fanciest or that kind of thing. It's for them, it's like all the memories that come back and just that's their field and, yeah, so they really like it. I like it.
I think it's good where we're at out there in the stadium. I love the walk down the path in the high school for the graduates, with the police department leading and I think that's a memory that they're gonna have for the rest of their lives, right? When they get to see that. Plus that's the small town feel graduation, even though, we're gonna hit 225, 200, whatever. It makes it intimate, right? So that's what's awesome on it.
Maybe each year invest in one more tent.
We're going to be eyeballing weather and looking tents, and we can engage shuttles. That's an idea to help with the parking and connect from the other sites. And we'll be certainly someday adding parking across the street. We hope to do that not too long from now. So we'll look at other ideas, but I just wanted to get a pulse and see where you all are at, and then we'll add that into our planning for next year, because that's part of the schedule. Last day of school, looking at the smiles and celebrations, many of those pictures we put online. Not always a happy moment for every child, but certainly there were several that are high-fiving and celebrating, and some, of course, were sad to say goodbye, but you can see the love and the care. And just the waving and the bubbles, it was a really wonderful moment to say goodbye to those kiddos, which at this point in the summer, it won't be that long before they're right on back.
When I saw this picture, I had to chuckle. It's probably the only day they're allowed to put their hands and arms outside the window.
That's true.
That was like a real moment of freedom right there for them.
That's a small window of when that's okay. Yeah, as soon as they turned out of the parking lot, that was
Yeah, no more. Yeah.
we, of course, as the school system, love to get involved in the local community. We had a selection at the Kingsman Car Show in the middle of June. I was tasked to find the best representative for a school award, and of course, you have to go with a bus. So, VW bus, took the cake. It was beautiful, and there's our award winner on behalf of the school district, which was really fun. We are working on something new. We wanted to make a home. If you just think the last strategic plan, we had about 13 languages, maybe it was 12 spoken at home. We're doing a preparation to share that with you next month, and we're up to 20. And one of the things is we have beliefs and customs and traditions that span beyond what many of us know or are aware, and that impacts things when we do testing. We have students that fast, we have students that may not be available, and we wanted to get those dates out there just so for internally or externally, people could see what are all the things that are happening outside of school events for families. So we're working on a cultural calendar. I just pulled a few key pages from you. We've been working with the Puyallup tribe to see what those months and language represent as well. And so we'll have a draft for you that'll go on the website just as an informational item to help show that inclusivity, that no matter who you are, where you come from, you belong, and we want to recognize that. So that's a new addition that we've been working on that will be on the website. We'll have a draft for you, I think, in August that you'll be able to take a peek at. You did reference the letter of achievement, and really what that means is the goal is when they inspect all of our fleet, and the State Patrol looks at every fleet item, they don't want to find anything that would otherwise have meant that bus shouldn't have been on the road. When there's a brake issue or a leak or a faulty piece of equipment, they notify that bus as being out of service. It's not safe to take on the road. And for the last 2 years, they haven't found a single vehicle that has been deemed unsafe to be on the road. So we're very proud of that, and that's a good collaboration, not only between the bus drivers, but your mechanics and your front office, because your bus drivers, before they ever take a child anywhere, do a pre-trip, they do post-trip inspections. And so having that level of collaboration to make sure issues are noticed and remediated in a timely manner is incredible.
Plus listening to the bus drivers saying, oh, I'm noticing this, you know.
They are on it and
Right.
bring it back, and
Right.
we want to get those back on the road, but we certainly don't want anything to be out there when it's unsafe. We did do a presentation on behalf of the district. I was happy to say it was standing room only.
Oh.
People were sitting on the floor and standing all around as we shared kind of our last 2-year journey about agency and dignity and how's that working into a strategic plan. They were able to hear from my voice, Aaron's voice, and Cliff Freeze's voice about from each of our perspectives what have been our game changers, and that has led to lots of other feedback and inquiry. And Director Lee has been invited to go to OSPI and share some of those ideas here in a few weeks.
That's awesome.
So a lot of positive things are stemming from that. And, we are, of course, on a learning journey. I wouldn't say we've mastered anything just yet, but I think that was helpful for many people in the room to just hear, maybe get some ideas about what does that look like through either a school, district, or a superintendent board lens.
I really like the expression. on it.
If you zoom in on that, all the principals were teasing me, because whatever they got in my face, it
I
was a
know,
funny
I like,
looking
yeah.
thing.
You can
So-
see it, you can see it on the
Really
slide
passionate
on
and
there.
excited.
Yeah, literally excited, and I'm like, yeah, so that was the group text picture that was going around, so I thought I'd just share that for fun. And I think that is everything that I have for you this month.
Does
Either
this
that or
mean-
it's- Oh, no, there it went. Rose Lake Road, we did attend, so myself, Debbie, and Anthony and Lonnie from our transportation department attended Rose Lake Road East groundbreaking. Representative Morrell and Dan Meyer from Pierce County were there. So we got to see a lot of not only fellow builders, but our county representatives as well. Gave us a chance to talk about our issues and what's
Good.
happening. And we talked a little bit of side info about impact fees and things along those lines. So that was a wonderful experience. And again, 3 years from now, that'll be open, which when talking to Lonnie, she thinks from a routing perspective, that'll about half our time up there. So that's encouraging. And then someday, of course, we'll have a school up there, which would be wonderful. I think that concludes my report for the month of July. That does.
Thank you. Board, any questions?
Well, I was just, you also do that equity training with the staff here, correct?
We do.
Okay.
In fact, I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point, but when you look at our strategic goals and what we've adopted as a vision forward, and if you were to overlay that with diversity, equity, inclusion standards that are required from the state to teach at least in one of the 3 days, there is a very tight connection and tight overlap. So we don't really think that's a departure or veer from what our goals and our interests are. But we'll be able to kind of share that a little bit at a future date if you're interested, because we have to show and document through audit lens at least one professional learning day that's aligned. But we want that to be not different work, we want that to be the work.
Right.
And we think there's a very tight connection.
That's why I really appreciated all the different cultural elements there on the calendar, so that the community also sees that, and they're not so, well, they'll be surprised. You know, we're being transparent,
Yes.
that we,
Out front with the communication and transparent, yeah.
yes, yes.
That's great.
Very much so.
I just have to tell you, I told Ed, and so this might be off the thing, but his comments. I am so excited for our kickoff because I read the book and then I could not put the book
Yes.
down. It was so good. And it's like, I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's going to be so exciting.
Fantastic. Look, we'll have to plan so we are all not sitting absolutely together.
Yeah.
But I think we're all planning that we can to be there.
I probably will be Nana,
Okay, no problem.
but maybe I could watch it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah, it was a great book. Great story. All right. Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the May financial report. And I did not see any questions prior to the meeting. So Mike, you're shaking your head no, so I think we are good. Thank you very much. Director Brandon?
I really appreciated how much we put out there in the public.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so now we have presented by. Now I can talk.
say, Bonnie, you just want to for me. I'm not gonna finish my chin. You can draw a line. Just sit down. Got it. So this is the preliminary presentation of the budget. We will have the actual public hearing next month, followed by the potential board adoption. Next month is when maybe it'll be first time in 13 years I actually did one.
Yes, so I just want to personally invite the community, if you're watching this video, the next month is the budget hearing. So if you're curious about how money gets allocated throughout the district, that would be your opportunity to learn firsthand and ask your questions. So there were some comments that I saw recently from some people who would really benefit from listening to this presentation.
And just because I like factoids, just FYI, this is my 8th budget in Oregon, my like 13th overall, and fascinating. Brittany's son is as old as I've been in this district. And my first budget, 16-17, was 28 million. This current budget is 45 million. So in the time I've been here, we've gone up 17 million in expenditures, we've grown, we've spent more money, we're getting more revenue in, so wow, so many different changes. Okay, so let's see, everything in the budget, there it goes. We covered a lot of this, some of this first part in Budget 101, so I'm just gonna go over it. We have 5 budgets, one for each fund. The private purpose trust fund does not do a budget, it is just basically scholarships, so we don't budget that. It's not required by the state, and that's determined by the scholarships themselves. We're just the holder of the money. That's why there's 6 up there, but there's only 5 in a budget. We do I'm coming up with words. I'm looking at you. You don't know the word I'm looking for. I do create and publish a draft summary, a budget summary, which will go out on our website tomorrow. I do try to, as well, someone was saying what we try to put out there, I try to put every budget or financial or audit is all on the district website under business services. People don't realize it's out there, but all the information is out there. Every budget report you guys get, as soon as you've gone through the meeting, it's out there. So I try to give as much information as possible to the public, if they care to look at it. Our enrollment is this, we did enrollment the same way we usually do. Enrollment in kindergarten stays enrollment in kindergarten, and we use January numbers. Every other grade is rolled up. So with those numbers, we will end up with 2,681 in K through 12. We have about 3 kids in the ALE program in January, but really at the end of the year, that was closer to 15, but it goes up and down, so you never know. Our Open Doors program, which is the kids that have, it's called Dropout Re-Engagement is the other name of it, and we have about 9 kids in there. We had about 42 kids in Running Start this year, and because of, and when we get to the slide on it, you'll see the Running Start numbers have gone down and there's no chart on it, I don't have numbers, but college and high school has gone up. So our Running Start's going down, but our opportunities in our high school are going up. So that's a nice little flip. We currently have about 282 kiddos that are participating in our CTE classes from 7 through 12. About 38 in our special needs preschool program is about the estimate for next year. That goes up and down as they identify kids, as they turn age 3, and then those kiddos of course roll into our kindergarten program when they hit that age. And then currently we have about 375 budgeted for, and in January that was our number in special needs, which is about our average. We have not really changed a lot over the years, as we'll talk. So this is, did we change? I'll make sure, oh, it's up there. Thank you. I didn't even realize there was a, never mind. I can look up there. This is a chart of our enrollment and how we have grown since the year 2013. You can see it's pretty much trajectory up, with the exception, of course, of 2020, 21, and 21, 22, the COVID years. But we are back above budget-wise where we were in 1920, which was our last highest year. These are the charts for CTE. You can see that's just gone straight up. We're projecting it's going to stay about steady. I think there's a couple more offerings at the high school, but it's been growing like crazy, the classes that we've been offering at our schools, so it's great. As I said, the Running Start is going down a little bit. as offerings at our high school go up. Our special ed preschool numbers have gone up and down. One of the considerations why it's gone down is at one point the state decided that we should also include in that number our Birth to 3 program, which isn't really run by the district, it's run by an outside agency, but they decided to include it in our numbers and then they took it back again. So it's an in and an out, which is why there's some dips in there, but our numbers are pretty consecutive. So when you see it go up in 17, 18, and 18, 19, around there, that's when those were there, and then they went away again. And then like I said, our special needs program, our K through 21, is pretty much staying steady since about 1920. We haven't been doing a lot of ups and downs on there. Obviously, it's a lot more than 13, 14, but we are staying steady at those. So where's all of our money come from? Our money comes from state apportionment is the biggest part. That's about 60% of our budget. And then levy, voter approved is about 13.5. Categorical, meaning LAP, the Learning Assistant Program, CTE, all of those are more like almost 18% of our budget. Federal funds, which is going down for us. This is going to be 23-24 is our last year of our ESSER funds. So a few years ago, if you're looking at our budget, we had a lot bigger number for federal funds because we had all those ESSER dollars. 23-24 is the end of our ESSER funds, and so in 24-25 we will need to figure out what we're going to do with those programs that are currently funded by that pot of funds. So it will probably go down a little bit unless the state or the feds decide to give us more funding. The other part of federal programs would be our food service, that's considered federal, and then we have Title I and Title II, Title III, Title IV, and then our special needs federal program comes out of there, our funds come there. And then our last part is fee, which is 2%, it's been going down, and that is just like fees that we charge, which are very few, which you'll see later, is our fee programs. We don't charge a lot to our families to participate in anything. So this is a chart of, well, that is not what it looks like on my screen, but there's like little numbers on it. Mine looks a little bit different than that. I don't know where all my words went, but the one you have,
We have the good one.
you have the good one. I was like, that does not look the same exactly, but yeah, it's just a pie graph version of what I just talked about. Which obviously the biggest part of that is general purpose state. So that's the proportionate number we talked about. Expenditures, where does our money go? Obviously, our biggest pot is 70% goes to teaching, and then maintenance and operations, about 7% of our budget. Building administration is about 5%. Central administration is about 8.5%, closer to 9%. Food service is about 2%, transportation is 4%, and then our other programs, which is like technology, our motor pool, and our school insurance is just under 3%. And then that is the split out of the pie chart. And the biggest part, of course, is the total teaching. Total teaching is always the biggest part of our district.
Marcia?
Yeah.
Is my recollection accurate? I believe at one point total teaching was about 60%. Has that increased over time?
I have to look, but probably what also has increased is the percentage of our budget that goes to employees. So it used to be when I first got here, our employee amount was more like 74% of our budget. Now it's about 80%.
Okay.
So yes, the numbers have increased over time.
As a percentage.
Mhm.
Interesting. Thank you.
No problem. And then this is another graph of where our expenditures go in a little bit more concise. Teaching activities, teaching support, central admin. This one kept its little names on it on the board, so that's awesome. So basic education is the biggest part of our budget, which we don't like the way that looks. It just did something real weird. So basic education is the red part of that, and that's about 50% of our budget. That's the biggest part. That's the big red part. The little purple part is 17%, and that is the next one, and that is special ed. Then CTE is the next little pie piece above that, and the one above that is support services. So that would be grounds maintenance, district office, everything that's not included in teaching support. Where's the money go? In a different way. So by object. Object is which thing is paid out? Is it certificated salaries, classified salaries, is it stuff, is it travel? So the other way, there's multiple ways to break down where our budget goes. In this one, the biggest part of our budget is certificated salaries, which is about 40%. Then our payroll, benefits, and taxes are about 21%. Our classified salaries is 19%. Travel is about less than 1%, less than 0.1%. Supplies and materials is around 7%, and purchase services, which is usually mostly built of our contractual services that we need to go out for because we can't do it ourselves, kind of stuff, and that is about 13%.
So that includes our partnerships with, like student support services,
Yes.
our partnerships with different community.
Yeah, or later in the meeting, you have a few interlocals.
Yes.
Those would be included in the purchase services also, that kind of thing. No problem. And then this is the difference, so about 80% is the, I guess, pinkish, magenta-ish color, that is salaries. Salaries and benefits for our district, and then the purple up there is everything else. So, biggest chunk goes to salaries, and that's about 80% right now. This is the budget summary. This is our beginning fund balance for general fund is the one we talk about the most, and I'm estimating, hopefully, that our beginning fund balance will be around 4.8. Our total revenues projected right now are a little over 45. Our expenditures are a little under 46. Transfers out, which is really just a transfer from general fund to debt service to pay for a non-voted debt, which is an energy project we did back in 2013-14. And then our ending fund balance projected for 23-24 is about 4.1 million. And then you can see all the other funds up there as well. This piece is required to present. We have a ESSB, which I think is a substitute bill that requires us every year to let you know how we spend the MSOC dollars that come in very specific areas. So ALE, basic ed, we are required to let you know that how much we get in compared to how much we currently have projected in the budget to pay out. And in part of my presentation, I must present this to you. So currently, those different areas, the MSOCs for those areas, we are going to be spending about $1.2 million more than the state allocates us. And so that would include supplies and materials, purchase services, travel, and capital outlay for basic ed, ALE, dropout re-engagement, and then district-wide support. So, last one, is there any questions on this?
Is the dropout engagement
It's also called Open Doors.
is that a computer program, or is?
It is a computer program. It's through a company called Graduation Alliance, so it's part of our contractual services. They have specific state required things they have to meet for the kids to participate and to be able to receive a grade.
Okay, so they don't do that for the ALE?
It's separate. So this is kiddos that are over the age of graduation but have not graduated, that want to graduate with a diploma. Instead of going for a GED until the age of, I believe, 21, I think it is, they can participate in the Open Doors program, which is also called Dropout Re-engagement. Same thing. Yeah.
Where is the 1.2 million difference covered? Where's that?
Which $1.2 million difference?
The difference between our total MSOC allocation and our total budgeted expenditures.
Levy, because that is the apportionment version of what we are allocated for those. So the difference comes out of our levy dollars.
Okay, gotcha.
Among other things, our levy dollars cover everything athletics, overages in other places, transportation, food service, special ed.
Yeah.
This is just some very specific programs. Why they call out these programs is because a few years back, when this went into place, they increased the amount they were giving to schools for the material, supplies, and operating costs. And they wanted us to be required every year to show that we weren't giving it to the employees. So this requirement came out of that to show that we're actually using it for the things they intended us to use it for, and that you guys know that we're using it for what they intended it, that they being the state, when they increased those allocations. And they increased the allocations, I think this started back in about 17, 18. but the requirement to present that information to the board has not been removed from any budget adopted from the state following that year.
So they gave us money.
We spent it as we're supposed to.
Spent it how we're supposed to, but there's still not enough to spend it on things that we need.
Correct, but we're fully funded.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But,
Ha, ha, the finance gals.
Sorry, that was my little, you probably heard that, sorry, that was a little snarky remark. Yes, of course,
there's
we're
also data as to why we have to run.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, there's multiple things. I mean,
Yes.
there's a report at year end that, once again, it's a report that I'm required to do. It's called it's a revenue to expenditure of every single account. And it shows on there where our extra money comes from. Does it come out of local? Does it come out of state? Does it come out of levy? Which fund does it come out of? And what are we spending over our allocations in different areas? And yeah, that's it. Usually, yes, a lot of money. That's why we have to run levies.
Okay.
The other thing that will be posted on our website, and I think I did include it, is our budget summary. I'm not going to go over it unless you guys want me to. It's just a 19-page document that summarizes basically what I just gave to you and summarizes the 218-page document that the state puts out that no one wants to read. Well, except me. Except me, yes. Yes. Yes, it's surprising that it's 218 pages now. It used to be so much longer. More information, it's out there by lots of different categories. Anyone who wants to see how much money we spend on everything, it is broken down every which way you can think of.
And thank you for making it so.
Yes, understand.
That is,
And thank you for, I noticed the little chart that we never get into our saving, our bottom thing that we save for. And
that's, yes. So the board, there's a board requirement that we, not requirement, request, because we can't make it a requirement, but we can request that we have 5% of our ending fund balance sitting in that. I mean,
we never have.
we have not gotten into that money yet.
So nice.
June of every school year is our closest month to that, but we didn't hit it this month. June is my scary month.
Well done.
Do you have any other questions for me? And then next month, you'll get this again, probably the same information. It's not going to change a lot, most likely, unless there's any comments. This will go out. It'll be on our website. There's an email address, budgetinput@orning.wednet.edu, that people can email questions. They can call me. I'm waiting for my first one.
We should put that on a banner on that day.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I really appreciate that Brittany put it on Facebook,
It was.
our announcements.
Yep, and, yeah, I just got certificates here, but, yeah, there's.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much.
That's good to see you. Yes.
Thank you. I am tempted to call you and disguise my voice.
Could you? Just call in. I won't know it's you. Call from your husband's phone, I won't notice.
On the record, I'm laughing on the outside, crying on the inside.
Good evening. Well, I wanted to talk with you a little bit today about the employee engagement survey, which we have been using since 2017. It has changed slightly over the time since we first launched it. For example, we used to use a company called Qualtrics through subsidiary of New Measures, and now we have a way to confidentially provide a survey through our own tools and resources with Google Docs, so that no one's providing a name, no one's providing an email, there's no way for us to know who provided the information.
And we're saving thousands of dollars.
We are saving thousands of dollars, that is true. Okay. So I put this up here because when we launched this survey in 22-23, we were still using our 5 goals. We do have some that we are adapting for the upcoming year because student agency, of course, will be, continue to grow and learn, but we will be embedding that in everything that we do. But for context, these are the 5 that we had promoted in the survey this past year as employees were beginning to fill out the survey. provided the survey one time. And this year, in talking with Ed, we thought, why not look at the data in the fall, and why not look at it again in the spring and see what that trend line really looks like, not only over time, but within a single year. When we started doing the survey, we had 25 questions that were kind of those questions that we'll look at that are scored on at that time 1 to 5 scale. And now we've pared it down to 10. Mostly because as we looked through the questions and we thought about valuing the employee's time and also, which item was like another item, it just was really easy to pare it down and to say, well, these two things are aligned, let's just tweak that question and make it one instead of two. So we have nearly 350 employees, give or take at any moment. It goes up and down just a tiny bit with some resignations or hires. But we've been at about 346, 348 for all of this last school year. And when we first talked with Qualtrics, the original company, they said if you can get 30% of your employees to participate in the survey, it's really great. And I just thought, oh, that didn't sound good at all. But they just said typically surveys 30 to 40% is what they're shooting for. Now we have had a much higher percentage, but this year we did come in at approximately 50%. So that means that 1 out of 2 of our employees participated in this, which hopefully, we'd love to have more participate, but hopefully that gives us a nice overview of what our employees are really thinking and feeling. And of course, we do this survey to look at our recruitment and retention. Why do people want to work here? What keeps them staying? When do they want to talk to their friends and family and say, yes, you need to look for a job here too? And so that's really what we're looking at in doing this. So I mentioned that we used to have a 5-point scale. Again, as we were talking, and pointing to Ed, as we were talking, one of the thoughts that came through was, why let it be neutral? Why don't we really think, why don't we really see what they're thinking? And, sometimes people are like, yeah, it can go either way. But in the end, if they have to pick, do I agree with that or do I disagree with that? It can provide additional information that can help us move forward. So we did move to this 4-point scale. Trickier than I thought. Well, in your slide deck, there are 10 questions on your and I think there's 2 below this here, and if anyone wants to look at it in our board docs, I know that it's presented with all of them there. We did define for employees that when they're talking about the word supervisor in this survey, that it really equals their evaluator, their direct supervisor. So that would be a common question that we would get, is the supervisor of central office. Ed, well, he oversees the entire district, but on a day-to-day basis, who do you take your direction from? So these are the 10 questions that we had that relate to that 4-point scale. And they're really focused on, as I already mentioned, that recruitment and retention. So is Orting a good place to work? Do you want to talk to others about it, as I said? Are you happy to work here, or do you feel like it's riddled with conflict? Does your supervisor interact with you? That's a big one in these questions. And do you feel that you're supported by the supervisor? And then overall, do people feel like they belong? So I mentioned that we did 2 surveys this year. We did one in the fall, and in the fall we had 193 participants. Again, remembering that we had about 348 employees. And during this survey, we know that the green is strongly agreed. That's what we want, the green. And then the yellow is agreed. But what we're looking to minimize and reduce and change our actions and behaviors so that we can be that place that people want to work are the red and blue. You can see on this that that very tall green bar talks about collaboration and really feeling like your people are treated with respect. So remembering that green is good, that's one thing that really seems to be working well in the district. However, is, the green bar is further down that sliding scale. And so we did not get the same amount of response on communication, at least in the green, that we would strive for. And I have to tell you, and those of you that have been with the board for a while know that this is a common thing that comes up each year, that communication is something that we need to continue to work on. I want to assure you, it's not for lack of trying, but what we've decided and even talked about a little bit in weekend meetings with Ed and our cabinet is we really need to figure out how to get underneath it. And we talk a lot about student voice, and we've been talking lately about staff voice as well. You know, what do the staff think about? And I'll share some of the comments with you a little bit later, but I'll give you that sneak peek of boots on the ground. I'm doing the job. This is them talking, not me. I'm doing the job. Why didn't you ask me? Or shouldn't you ask me? Or why did you just tell me that this is the way we're going to be doing things? Now, I think we're working hard to do a better job of that, but there are pockets or people within our system that are still feeling like, I have a lot to offer, and please ask me. So if you look at the spring data, and I know you can toggle back and forth with these on your slideshow, you'll see that the data looks very similar. Again, if you look at that collaboration, that green bar, it's way up there. And if you look at the one to the right of that with the yellow and the green's a little shorter, again, in the spring, we were seeing that communication is an area that we continue to work on. Now, in this particular survey in the spring, we were at 180 participants. So it's close. We had 193 in the fall and 180 in the spring. I credit that to spring is really busy, right? Educators. It's a busy, busy time. So we didn't see a lot of change, though. You can almost overlay these two surveys and see that a lot of the data is consistently similar.
I'm curious to why collaboration is so high
Isn't that
and
interesting?
communication is so low, because to me, collaboration is communication. So that now I'm wondering, what are they thinking when they're saying communication or collaboration? Because, you know, they should be, I would think they'd be more aligned. And so if they're obviously collaborating with different people than they're communicating, saying they're not communicating with. And that's interesting to me.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head of what we're trying to figure out when we talk about problems of practice in the work that we do, just trying to really figure out what does communication mean.
Well, something that might be revealing, because what I thought was collaboration is your team, which to me is grade level,
Like PLC.
PLCs, people you work with. Communication, it might be the whole building. And so I was curious as to, were any buildings better than other buildings, or any groups better than other groups? So that's, yeah, we used to do breakdowns as to,
To buildings.
yeah. I'm not asking for it, but I'm just saying that could be revealing as to what specifically that meant.
And we do provide those to the building.
I had some experience with employee surveys, and through the communication only surfaces, it's very common, but through conversations with the employees, there's sometimes the idea that there's a whole bunch of information out there that's not being shared, when in reality, the totality of information available is being shared, but there's an assumption that there's more. And so getting to the root of that and clarity around that for everyone is really difficult to do. But it's one of the reasons communication always surfaces. There's a belief that there's more to the story when sometimes there's not.
Well, the other thing is that the communication is going to reveal what you said earlier about, well, why didn't you ask me? I mean, and
Yes.
that it's the two-way communication rather than just the top-down
Yeah.
communication.
I haven't talked with a large sample of people, but in those that, just a handful that I have talked with, who have been with boarding for a long time, either city or, community, or school district, one of the things that I heard there too is that we were so tiny, such a small school district, that people felt like they knew everything. And some people don't have a business need to know, but it feels good when you know what's going on in the it's, why is the copier in that corner now instead of that corner? And, you know, we just think it makes sense when we move. I don't know, but we will keep working on that, we're committed to that. So, in addition to the 10 questions, we have 2 open-ended questions. And those are basically, what do you think should be changed? And what do you think is really working for us? And so we've got those, and they just get to fill in whatever they're thinking. It's just open frame. And this I'll call my fail. This was a Wordle. And I gotta tell you that when people are filling in what should be changed, they use the word student and staff and communication a lot in their sentences, but this in and of itself doesn't get to the crux of it for you, I don't think. So I want to just fill in the blank a little bit with some thoughts that I reviewed when I was looking at the feedback. So things that we heard in the feedback: better discipline in student behavior, just wanting some different approaches to how children are handled during the day when behavior issues arise. More collaboration time. They want to be given resources. Authentic engagement from supervisors. There it is again, communication, especially when it's impacting my job. Flexible daily schedule was one that came up at, I believe, a few times. Moving the PLC day or time, not playing favorites. So just people feeling like they don't have that same opportunity that someone else might. Having basic supplies, and the example is Kleenex. Why do I have to ask parents to send Kleenex in for kids? They felt that some staff were condescending to them, and so that just made me think as an HR director, just kind of some of the customer service pieces that we might be able to collaborate on and partner and provide. More teacher voice. Some people would like AC, so there's your mom for you and moving forward. But security throughout the building, just people feeling safe. And then I left this one, so I'll close with this for this section. It was a bus wash station. There you go. And then on the next one is, you know, what keeps me working here? And similar thing with the Wordle, where we can see that some of these things obviously are in the feedback that we received, and students and kids and community keep us here. But more directly to some of the comments, direct communication, which I thought was interesting because I wanted to know what does that mean in comparison to the graph. Good people, students, sense of community, that are close, including here. There were multiple administrators that were named that have been supports to staff members on both cabinet and principal team, where they work here because of them. People are nice, location and size. It's, we've got a hardworking staff dedicated to students, relationships, and I'll close with kind people. So those were some things that we heard. And where do we go from here? This is an annual survey that we do, and like this year it was semi-annual where we did it twice. But really just as a cabinet, considering when we'll launch that again in the fall, we're looking at late October, early November, which would somewhat align with what we've been doing. We know that we want to incorporate more student voice, and we might tweak the 10 questions a little bit, not to discard them, but to strengthen them with regard to agency and dignity, because those are strong elements and components of what we're doing in the work. And then we know that our supervisors, whether it be department or schools, that they will want to take time to hear from their staff, figure out what their problem or problem practice is, and set goals around that so that they can monitor that.
You might even want to be really specific and ask, in what area do you think we're lacking communication? I mean, that might give you an answer.
Take to the road that.
Yeah.
We've worked and will continue to unpack that data with our labor partners. We meet on an ongoing basis with all of our labor groups. And so that's some of the conundrum, which is there's things that show up here that aren't showing up at the labor table. So we want to figure out how do we do a better job of building that trust and that transparency and the comfort with lifting in whatever format an issue, so it doesn't go to the parking lot and becomes something that we can lean into collaboratively and work to address.
Well, I think you also had mentioned, and I think that's one of the best things you can do. Chris Willis was really good at it, and I think when you continue to stop over and ask the teachers, how's it going? Is everything going okay? Eventually, you become comfortable with that and actually tell him, you know. And you were talking that that might be something that you guys might do more often because, you know, maybe not the first or second time, but if you continue to stop and ask those questions, I think you'll get some good answers.
I want to just applaud the process. I know it's not, it's easy to sit there and say that you can't make 100% of the people happy 100% of the time, but I really appreciate the fact that where there is growth to be made, it's a focus for you. It's something to really step into and not shy away from. And
I really
think
think
that's-
things have improved.
well, yeah, I mean, it's a great process, and I thank you for the time and for the diligence to which you give it.
Thank you.
That's great.
It's important to cabinet to find out what's going on with our employees and to continue that work. In closing, I just want to share with you that we had something that's not in your PowerPoint. We had 55% of our certificated staff participate. We had 35% of our classified, and then we also had some admin and non-represented employees participate. And lastly, I just wanted to share, we had every single location in the district participate. Some had too small of a sample size to really provide the information, but I was thrilled to see that even with our departments who don't always have easy access to a computer, that 2 and 3 and 6 people were participating. So it's great. It's a nice cross-section of the district.
I like adding the spring apps to, it says that we're paying attention and we care, and it gets a little bit hard for employees to see the work that is a result of surveys, because some things are district initiatives and some things are building and some things are departmental. So that is something that when you can tie an effort back to survey feedback, hopefully we're able to do that so they can see movement and that it's worthwhile to give them feedback. That's hard to do, I know. But I'm glad we're asking. Just valuing that too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Brittany, you are up.
I put a lesson
Oh,
on
okay.
podium for you.
I wanted to start with a fun fact too, that I will have been here for a year at the end of August, and what a journey that we have been on. And the data that I'm about to go with you is the highlight of this journey. Okay, so let's go back to May of this year, where we did a survey to get some bond feedback from our two bonds that we presented to the community in February and April. So we sent out the survey to all of our families that are on Parent Square, which is roughly about almost 3,000 people, staff and families, got the message or the link to the survey via email and app and text message. And then we also posted it on our social media. And then families in our annual report, they'll get a second opportunity if they miss this to fill out this survey. In this round, we had 313 survey submissions, which is okay. So respondent demographics. So most of the people that responded were ages 35 to 49. That's 65% of the people that responded. Most of the people that responded to were parent guardians of an OSD student. And then it's pretty even the rest of the people that responded. Most people have lived here for 6 to 10 years. And bond awareness and comments is people that voted and that kind of information. So luckily, most people did know that responded that we had a bond. We presented a bond on the February 14th election. And other people that responded, most of them did vote yes. For our April bond, most people again knew that there was a bond in April, and most people voted yes that responded. So then we asked, you know, did they feel like the February, even though it's the same bond proposal, if they felt like it was too expensive. And I feel like this is a pretty even pizza pie here, but most people disagreed that it was too expensive. And then the other thing that we thought that would be a good thing to ask our community was if they felt like the designs of the elementary were too expensive looking, and most people didn't agree with that sentiment. But we did see that quite a bit on social media. I think it's important why we do these surveys, because sometimes people, they don't feel comfortable saying that kind of stuff online, and so doing these anonymous surveys help people speak. Future planning, so these are questions. So we asked questions about, you know, what part of the bond would you support? Most people would support rebuilding Ording Elementary and additions to Ording High School. The following issues that were most important to people that responded, the one that was most important was addressing overcrowding. That got 85%. And then the second was improving building safety and security. For factors that they would like you guys to know, the highest one was building plans should limit the need for portable classrooms. And these are just other responses. I read every response that, like, for other things that they felt like were important for you guys to know. So these are like the ones that were said the most. So just like the ones that I gleaned from those responses. It was brought up again, we don't need all the fluff, decorative features, we just need a building, playground, and play shed, which kind of plays into it's too expensive looking. Too bougie, yes. A big one was prioritize academics over athletic facilities. People really did not like the athletic part, is the consensus that I have seen on social media and also in the survey. It was said often. Even though people felt like, most people that responded didn't feel like it was too expensive, a comment that was brought up often was they felt like taxes were too much, and they didn't want any increase in the taxes. I did put on there that a few people said the board did a good job and I wouldn't change a thing. So that was a positive.
Just a few.
Just a few. That was one that was said a few times. For ways that we reach people, most people said email that they get from Fan Square and from probably their teachers and principals. Because we send out newsletters and information, but also the principals do and teachers use Fan Square. So email was the highest one. With the second being social media. We asked, would our community be interested in, being a part of some forums and some in-person communication? Most people said that they would be interested in a community meeting to learn more about our facilities projects. And as far as being a part of the CFAC, most people were not sure if they wanted to attend. And then this was the last question. So I read through all of them, and it was similar. They didn't want tax increases. A few people said they felt like it was a waste of time to run the bond during a special election. A few people also said that they felt like the bond was too large, there was too many projects, it was too expensive. They felt that we needed to divide up the projects and do bonds with smaller projects and a smaller tax increase. A few people talked about voter turnout. They thought that maybe doing those meetings that we had, the 6 o'clock one that we had like at PTR and OES, they felt like we should offer more times and different days. People felt like we needed to be more on top of the disinformation that was being passed around on social media. We needed to be more upfront with the reality that our buildings are facing.
Much more than we can get with that.
Some people brought up that they felt like there's a real disconnect between our residents in Bonnie Lake and they're not feeling like they're really part of the Orleans School District. And then another one about run the bond in November. And then at the end of this, I gave you guys a link to a spreadsheet of all the responses. Any questions?
Well done, but I did have a question. When you're looking at the yes, no, it was like towards the beginning of the thing. Did it kind of coincide with the yes, no votes? So like how you voted, I voted yes, did that, I don't remember April kind of being that, but did you feel that it kind of corresponded to with how people voted? The percentage wise, it seemed like the February one was pretty close to that one, it was pretty close to what we ended up with as far as the yes votes.
Yeah. A lot of people responded to the last question that, like other things that they wanted to say, that they forgot to vote in April. And that was the biggest one in April. February was a similar thing, a lot of people forgot. I think that's the second biggest on each of these, is that they did not vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the challenges, we will have in our annual report a link to this same survey. As you saw, the very few community outside of the circles of normal communication responded. And so this will go to every resident within our school district, and we hope that we get additional feedback to include those pulses or visions for folks that are a little bit more disconnected maybe than a staff member or a parent or family member. They have greater access with parents, square, text, emails to information. And really our primary strategy or only way outside of that is the mailer. So we're hoping by connecting to the annual report we can get additional information, but we want to give this to you now to start thinking about what does that September board session, October board session look like, sound like, and how do we help support you to lean into that decision? Because as if you recall, to put something on the ballot in February, November, we would have to have a decision. You're getting at least a pulse, primarily made up of family and community that have that school connection of kind of where they lean and what's surfaced as a priority. Keep in mind that HVAC tended to elevate because of the time this went out, it was very, very hot. And our schools were very hot as well.
That's what I was thinking, is that most of the people that answered the survey, or all of them actually, are somehow attached to the school. So when we looked at the communication, it made sense that it was Gmail or email, but if you're looking at all the people that aren't connected to the school, we got to find the way that they're best. They're not going to look probably not going to look on the school website because they don't have any kids in school, and they don't get the emails because they don't have any kids in school. And I know that typically flyers aren't a huge success, don't seem to be, but it's like, okay, so then what is, I mean, the flyers to the parents, yes, but it's like all these other people that aren't connected to the school that way. And I think, I might be totally wrong, but probably a lot of our no votes could have been those people. And so how do we better communicate with them, I think, is something that we need to think about. Just like the senior center. you know, they could get in a week 90-some seniors there, and so finding out, and you know, they don't like technology, a lot of them, or whatever, so finding out the way to go there or figure that out, things like that, I think, you know, sounds like they do like the open house things that we did, so. But yeah, that's just the hard part, is finding the answers for all those people that we don't communicate with on a regular basis, so.
Yes, and so that's one of the things that me and Ed have talked about is possibly doing like a fall printed newsletter that goes out to everybody, and a spring one that kind of tells our story about what's going on here. Because that's the thing that I kind of gleaned from social media and from the survey, and just what I've heard is that people don't really know what's going on in our schools, and they're not checking our social media, they're not checking our website, and so if we put it in their mailbox and say, hey, this is what we're going on. That's what I've seen other school districts. I've done a little research on what.
And that was the best,
It seems like that's the vehicle that we might have to get into to send out those mailers that kind of tell our story, you know, what's going on, so people know. So they don't feel like, you know, so they know what's going on.
We need some of your great videos into their television.
And one of the issues is we don't have a local newspaper, so,
Yes.
you know, and we don't have that avenue. One of the things I wanted to point out about where they were talking about the sports facilities, a lot of people don't realize that when we talk about another gym at PTR, that we are required to have PE classes, a certain amount of PE for our students, and because our schools themselves have so many students in them, that we don't have adequate facilities for a class we are required to provide. And they also don't understand the connection between the gym and the cafeteria, that a lot of the issues with the gym are also those issues that they were complaining about lunches. And so while they might see this as, oh, that's just sports, but it's actually core facilities too.
I've been wondering if some of those negative comments about sports though were more related to the high school gym.
But they don't have enough gym space. Cliff has said they don't have enough gym
I
space.
know, they can't
for
put the entire
for the
school
PE
in the gym
for-
for
or for the
assemblies or
PE
anything.
classes.
I don't think they're equating the PE
Learning
classes
space.
to that space. I think they're just thinking athletics,
Yeah.
so making that more of a, yeah. And still, I got, and I know that still, when I was working at the senior center selling plants, and all the people were coming and they were talking about things, they still did not quite understand that our other bond was paid and this was not on top of that. And I mean, I don't know what we do about that, but I do know that that was still a big misunderstanding out there. And I don't know how to fix that, but.
Well, we're allowed one mailer. We can send the same thing twice, but the idea of a newsletter is we can use this data,
Right.
future data, to
Right.
begin to tell the story and
Right.
lift information so that we can correct and help them engage in our school community and hopefully come and connect, go to a concert, go to an athletic event, or do something where they step foot on here and feel invited as part of your feedback in May, and we'll share strategic goals in a little bit. But I think all of those pieces help to connect to the bigger story. So the only time they don't hear from us is when there's an ask, and it becomes part of our regular occurrence, not only from what's hitting my doorstep and coming into my home via mail, but also my invitation or ability to be included in work that we do.
Yeah,
And kind of blend that gap between the school and the community.
Yeah.
I also think it's okay to do you know, like those little yellow newspaper things that you find at the restaurant?
Oh,
Sitting there at teriyaki and it's got the horoscope in it, they're, you know, just black and white, yellow, single color, just simple, you know, one sheet informational pieces about the district, if that went out more frequently versus the beautiful full color. you
Or
know,
even,
spread.
and also leaving them like at Tim's and at
Yeah,
all the places where
Yeah.
people go that, you know, they can look at it while
Yeah.
they're eating it, whatever.
exactly.
And at the library, because a lot of the
Yeah.
people that do not have computers,
Yes.
that is where they go to
Yeah.
access that.
How do they say, what do you think about the feedback? Is there any feedback on door to door when you do the put them in the doorways. I was just wondering if that was more
Not
effective.
related to that, but when we unpacked precinct data, we saw an increase. If you look at the last levy election and what our community, the closer we were, not all of our community precincts were at or above 60%, but we saw an increase after that first election, and that's where we really focused the door-to-door campaigns, where we were above or really close. So the support around our city center and neighborhoods, particularly where kids are involved, that did grow.
Okay.
So that would be part of the strategy to consider, not only the package weight. As you recall, the only way really to substantively reduce scope is to take the high school out from a cost perspective. PTR was menial in terms of the overall project cost. So that is shaping up to be a decision to appeal to the broader context, price, package, and we may, after this next data, you may provide some direction. Well, let's whittle it down to 2 ideas and put that back out and get additional survey feedback and figure out what people would support, because the only way to get to 60%, if there's enough validation here in that school community to get to 60 if the engagement was high. But without that high level engagement, the only way to get to a yes out of 11,000 people is to put a package out there that would have their support behind it. And it seems that taxes are going to play a relevant factor into how they vote again.
Yeah, I was gonna say, everything I heard was locked with taxes, from people I communicated with. And then, the other that I was wondering is how that 18 to 24 range, right? I mean, I even knew some of the kids that just graduated high school. They're like, oh, I'm not gonna vote for it. I'm like, live with your mom and dad. They're paying the tax. Like, trust me, you don't need to absorb this, but, you know, they're not engaged.
No.
You know, I believe we gotta have that, because we're relying on that, 34 to 49 or 50, whatever, right?
We are. The average age of the bonds a voter was 58 and 60, and that demographic doesn't represent in this data set
No.
mostly at all. And so we have to think about who are we appealing to and how are we getting that information out, and that's some of the coming work in the next few months.
Well, one of the things that I noticed in the data, you know, when you talked about what you could leave out, we had a huge jump in CTE class
Yes.
participation. And if we cut out the things at the high school, that directly impacts those students. And I'm wondering if in some of those CTE classes, there's some way to share the need, like we saw that from the Future Farmers, okay? How they shared the need for the facilities. If we can somehow use some of those classes to get the students to help share that need.
That's the frustration, because cutting out the high school would save money, but it's also one of the things that they mentioned they want the most.
Yeah.
And I do know that typically people that are older like the CTE. They like that it's coming back, they like that it's,
That's because we're trying to hire skilled people.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's what
Yeah,
speaks to
so
that
that's
age
a
group,
real-
whereas a 25, 34-year-old.
yeah,
It's
they don't,
not.
no, but the older
Well,
people.
that's not represented in this survey back to the public. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I heard too. is,
Yeah.
Oh, CTE, absolutely, I'm on board for that.
Yeah. Everybody loved, everyone,
I
so
know.
I'm so glad that you guys are, you know.
So that's a tough discussion that we're gonna have to have.
And one of the other things is that since we're pushing student engagement, for a lot of kids, those CTE classes are the student engagement that really is helping them through.
I would love, when you do the wider survey with the community, I would love to be able to compare, because I feel like these are our people, these are our employees, and I would love to see the gap, like how far off are we? Because we do, even though we're the largest employer in the community, we still represent just a very small portion of the voters. And so I really want to be able to carve out what does everybody else think. And because some of these things don't line up, like we heard about, it's the taxes. Well, then I look here and there's, 45% of the people strongly disagree that it was too expensive.
Yeah,
And only 30% said yes. and 22% are neutral. So when you start to lump these things together, the fact that this, was the new elementary school too bougie? There's, over 50% of the people say, no, it wasn't, this is what I want. So I'm really curious how the rest of the community will stack up, because I agree maybe scaling down our projects. But otherwise, what we heard and what I'm seeing is a little,
I think you're gonna find a big difference between these people about the too bougie and the other people, the older people. I think there's gonna be a big spread there, because they think differently, they.
older and that 25, that younger
Yeah,
group.
I don't know about.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's why I was thinking like little easy mailers, easy to digest, in their hands, they don't have to read another email. Because if you're not connected to the school, that email is really not relevant, and I'm not gonna prioritize it over anything else, so.
Well, the other thing is
We have to do it to get to our people, but.
it's tapping into a few of our former students who are in that group and having them help us spread the word. Because a couple of former students in that age group said something to me on social media, and I thought, and I actually said to them, I said, so next time around, I'm gonna reach out to you and ask you to help.
I also think that, that comment, would you go to a meeting? Yes. Do you want to be on the CPAC? No. And so, but that's our reality. So how do we leverage that? If we can assure them that they won't be held hostage, or maybe CPAC is not a committee, maybe CPAC is something more fluid that allows people to come in and out. I don't know.
And that age group, the ones that we were missing, we're talking about digital.
Yeah.
How many meetings did they go to? They're on their computer.
Yeah, the virtual meeting I thought was, and that was easy for people to participate in, whether they were driving or up in Bonnie Lake or wherever they were coming from.
I think typically you're 18 to 24 and all kinds of politics and everything are not engaged.
And you need a
Like,
podcast.
I just think that's the way right now. And so
Yeah.
something, yeah.
It seems to me there can be a whole kind of think tank session going on when we get close to trying to.
Right,
Yeah.
good point.
Keep in mind, September board work session, we have loosely tied to facilities. What would you as a board of directors need to be comfortable working towards a package decision by November? And what sort of feedback would you want to help with that? And then a separate parallel course, regardless of what you decide, how is the best way to engage the community and stakeholders along the way for what I presume your decision would be a February vote? I would recommend, if not successful in February 2024, then you look to the November 2024 general election. That is at least the last general presidential election. That was a very high passage rate for school bonds, atypical of the data Trevor shared. If you remember, November is normally the third worst.
Right.
So it was over 80% passage rate last time around.
I
So
don't think there's any predictability. I think it's just a crapshoot.
you're going to roll dice one way or the other, and we have to tell the story.
I have had people tell me they think that the general vote is better to do than the special election.
And then we have to tell them that we cannot do it this November.
Not this November.
Right, because they go, well, so run it in November. No,
We did it.
I think just in terms of our global messaging, even outside the bond conversation, I think the points about addressing overcrowding and building a building plan that would limit the need for portable classrooms, as we tackle those issues and do the things that they're asking us not to do, that's how I read that, that we need to be clear in our communication about the why, and because we're basically going to go down that path of being even more overcrowded and having more portables at this point. So the communication around why and how they can affect that.
This will be helpful for information, depending on which way you want to go, to help whittle, reshape, or lean in with the same package with additive talking points. Helpful information of working with Matt and Liz with regard to HVAC. Like this time around, we can commit firmly to some projects based on this data point. We see that HVAC is very important to certain folks that responded, so that's something we can lean in with and said, okay, these elements need to be tight. Maybe stadium and the track and the lights come off, that's not as important, so, plus we've done the turf now, so those things can come off and land in the feedback, so we'll work to help Whittle, and I want to come back to this in August, after we've had a chance to think and debrief. Hopefully we'll have additional data points come in from the community at large, and then you can help provide some direction about what do you want that September work session to look like and sound like, and we can build, whether it's virtual, board learn and listen, additional CFAC, we can build additional processes from that work session to lean us in through that November timeframe. And Bonnie and I will work on a clear timeframe. Okay, here's our milestones that we have to have in place to hit whatever that election cycle will be.
Have you guys, because I have been getting questions about what we're gonna do next year to help with the overcrowding? Because I'm getting questions about what's the school doing? Are we getting more portables? Are we, I don't know if we wanna, I mean, people are doing.
Walk to school around, so there's no parking anymore. And I kind of being flip, but in truth, I'm not. When people ask me that question,
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah, they're asking me, well, what are you guys
Yeah.
doing?
if you want to come to the game, park in the pasture and hike in, because the parking lot's going to be full of portables. That's
But-
our reality right now.
I mean, they, and we told them that, and so now they'll see it.
I think we should paint them fluorescent yellow.
Interesting color.
Thank you, Brittany.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
very good job. Thank you.
And thanks for entertaining our ideas.
Of course.
We're all like, here's what you should do with digital media. Oh, good. Good feedback, and I'm glad we asked, and I want to keep asking on this path, whatever that looks like, whether it's more survey, more community sessions, or, fill out this form and tell us what you think, whatever that might
Well, Carrie, we can go back to you and I standing on the corner. So-
Yes. Yes. All right, strategic plan.
Okay, this, I'm going to go rather quickly and not read every slide word for word in detail, because you've had a chance to preview this now for a minute. But I do want to share a high level from our May board work session retreat back to where are we now and the work that we've done. What we committed to you as a board of directors is bringing a draft revision of our goals and measures that were more reflective of agency and dignity, and what would it look like if we took off that first goal around agency and more deeply embed that and the dignity ideas in the remaining goals. So that is what we're bringing a draft. So Cabinet and I have worked on this, we've tuned it with each other, and based on your feedback, go ahead or revise or change tonight. We will work to edit the strategic plan. We, as a reminder, have to create a new document. Brittany doesn't have the one that Rashad created. She has a draft all ready to go. So based on your feedback, we'll bring back what would then be a final draft of a 23-2026 strategic plan for you in August. And if you say go on that, then our school improvement plans, how we structure the board work sessions, will be a derivative of those 4 goals and the measures that you've since approved. Conceptually speaking, the strategic plan is owned by the board of directors. Cabinet and myself, we think about, okay, if those are the ends, those are the targets, what are the means to get there? And that's what we bring for you, the best way to work towards those strategic outcomes. So looking back to May, we shared these ideas, and this definition has evolved over time around agency, and that's really, if you think about the empowerment idea, how are we going to help to make sure kids leave here confident in their ability to set and achieve their personal goals and experience those high levels of agency that we've celebrated so much? We have to put a name and strategy to that, so we discussed that. If you're really serious about the idea around connection or belonging, what are the conditions necessary to build that, to grow that, to drive that? Well, we put language in that belonging element, both in agency, and that dignity idea surfaced from the very first time we did that parent survey to help build the strategic plan. And then what does that equity or commitment to each child look like? And we strengthened our language last year and really made that about that guarantee or the promise that every student is going to get what they need. And we try to celebrate that and champion that not only through the academic lens, but through our other goal areas as well around whole child and community partnerships and student support. So we discussed that, and we discussed in greater detail the ideas around agency and dignity, and I put that up there just to refresh that conversation from May, because that's the first time we've been back to that. We did synthesize from where we did kickoff last year. If you recall, we had 10 different strategies around dignity, and what we learned last year, primarily through student and staff feedback, is that's too much. I did get that down to a more focused, coherent manner. So we whittled that down, actually with students working with staff, to get that to 4 bullets. What I thought would be new or interesting based on the feedback we've had at the leadership table, if you remember our current strategic plan, we have this section on who we are, and we thought it might be good to explore that further through the lens of a student or staff member or leadership. So if this idea resonates, we would have that who we are section in the strategic plan speaking to what does it mean to be a student in the boarding school district? What does it mean? Well, let me just expand on that. So ideas we came up with so far, we want them to be able to think critically, ability to persevere, solve problems. We want them to have strong relationships. That was a tremendous strong theme in that original survey we did from all stakeholders. We want them to be motivated, empowered, find joy in learning. So we tried to tease out themes that reflected the feedback we have that can put a stronger vision around who we are through each of these lenses. And if you like this idea, we'll take some of these concepts and elaborate that on a page around who we are in the Warding School District. Staff member, and we're going out on the career fair, we did a lot of hiring. What are we looking for? Well, we want them to be committed to learners and appreciate and enjoy a connection to the broader community, believe that their work makes a difference. And in fact, some of what we're going to do in that staff employee engagement survey is bring a stronger thread or connection to agency and dignity, so if we can see that these things are really embodied and resonating with our staff. Do they love teaching, learning? Do they love kids? So those are some ideas that we put on paper about what does it mean to be an Warding staff member. Teasing out the leadership element just a little bit more, what do we want? We want somebody who's able to collaborate and work with a broad stakeholder group. We want them to be committed to learning and growing. Of course, effective communication, that's been a primary board goal since I walked in the door, is really improving and growing that, so that has to be on the list. We want them to think about how to lean into the problems. What are the issues and what are we celebrating, but also what are we confronting through our leadership lens. So these profiles, I think, under a who we are, can give us a broader picture about who we are, not only through some data lenses around here's our attendance and graduation rate and 20 languages spoken, but more personally connecting to who we are through each of these different lenses. We don't have a recommendation on modifying the mission statement as we discussed in May. With vision statement, I'm recommending one word addition, and that's the word know. We talked about that a lot last year. You as a board are really wanting to press into that idea around data. How do we know who needs what kind of support are we going to give, and how do we know that? That's the idea of known in my mind, that idea to connection. So we would recommend that we add that to the vision statement. Values, we don't have a recommended change. From there, the theory of action, we have a slight change to the if statement. A theory of action represents that idea, what do we believe? If we do some things well, then what would that create? So the way we structure that, we don't have a change on the then, but we try to more embed the agency idea and dignity idea in the if statement, which is if we consistently engage students in rigorous learning opportunities that develop individual agency and honor personal dignity, then we can get to the equitable outcomes that lead to the connection, inspire, and empowerment that we're desiring. If you remember, the last one was about building schools or creating schools. And we wanted to shift that away from creating schools to what are we really about kids and what we want to build in kids. So that's reflective in the shift of the if. And then the ideas around agency and dignity, because mostly people won't know what those mean. We want some place in that to show those ideas so that has some greater context. We'll probably add a sentence or two, like we believe these strategies are the greatest moves we can do to get to those equitable outcomes. So it'll need a sentence to help lead people, but those are the ideas in a more simplified graphic form that we would want to present to you. Thinking about the goals, academic growth would be the first goal. Community partnerships and connections, whole child and student support systems, those aren't a change from our previous goal areas. We debated is academic excellence, but if it's about outcomes and summative, what about the growth? So we had a go around about what's the right language, and we felt growth is really reflective of who we are and where we're trying to espouse. Wherever you're at as a child, we want you to leave here better. So growth seemed to reflect. So from there, this is mostly new from language. For each goal, we revised the goal statement. I don't have a laser pointer, but the ensuring academic growth through what? We tried to capture things that we've discussed as a board team that reflect how are we going to do that, which is through high expectations, building rigor, essential standards, and incorporating agency and dignity as drivers. Now, most lay people won't know the idea of qualitative and quantitative, but you as a board, we've tried to describe our measures through both lenses over time. If you think about some of the elements of agency that we celebrate, let's go back to FFA. Well, when they did the farm-to-table presentation and they're creating their own outcomes and incorporating kids, that doesn't fit in a nice, neat percent. But if I was doing a board presentation, that would be part of a portfolio of experiences that I could bring to the board and say, here's an idea of a task, a work sample, an activity that is building agency, reflected in the academic content area. But then the quantitative measures are things that we also had on there last year, which is state testing, student growth metrics, looking at measures along the way, which might be your interim assessment block or SBA growth levels. So we're monitoring and measuring along the way, but we're also not wanting to lose that qualitative element as well. So those are bullets that we think are good ideas through both lenses that we can use to capture. Notice we didn't say, here's our starting point, here's our ending point, things like that. We're just putting the ideas out, and if they resonate with you, we'll do like we did last time, which is, here's our current level as best as we know, and if we don't have a measure yet, then we'll develop a baseline this year. Some of these, like an agency dignity survey, we really haven't collected that idea about student voice. We've shared examples of it, but we're going to think about how do we best do that and bring that to you. Embedded in our strategic plans. Community and
something that you do in a repeatable way. I feel like that's something that over
Yes.
previous years, we've been constantly, and I expect things to evolve, but we haven't been able to show a pattern of improvement
No.
easily, because we're constantly recreating. And
Yes.
so as we get to that next level, what's something that we can repeat for a period of time, whatever that period of time is, but something that we can demonstrate that improvement.
So where a unit plan didn't exist previously, that would be an example of something that we could create. The panorama survey data will continue next year, and in fact, you'll see later on, we'd like to expand that both with community of how we get voice and feedback on those elements, but also with the students and the staff as well.
I think, and too, when we're looking at all this, it always still comes back to open communication, okay? It always comes back to knowing what's really going on. And I think that if maybe having some type of questionnaire, like, you know, when they, teachers do an exit interview, okay? Maybe we should do that with some of the seniors and the 8th graders and the 5th graders, because you're gonna get your most honest answers from those kids. And from different areas, not just from one group, but, you know, different, different types of kids. I just, because I know, hanging out with kids all the time, that we hear different things as adults than we do with the kids. And when they're that different, there's something wrong, So we need honest, open communication, and we can probably get that if we start. Agency is a big thing, but really, we want to hear what's working and what isn't, and they'll be really honest now that they're going to the next building, or graduating. They'll be honest and say, this really worked well, this is something that really isn't.
I don't disagree. This year, as part of our strategic work with our leaders, we're incorporating a book called Street Data. And in our strategic plans, we want to look to specified measures with our leaders. Once you set a goal, how do we collect evidence along the way and incorporate elements like student voice? And I think that's part of when we come back to you on those board workshops in the spring, how we want to unfold and tell that story. And what can we put our finger on, and how are we involving our stakeholders in listening and capturing their voice to confirm or refute what other data points say. For each measure, we would like to see multiple measure points to inform our progress of what's really working or growing or what isn't. The community partnership and connection, you can see a little bit more of a revision in language about what are we looking for in that regard, and ultimately we want those supports to lead to that belonging and empowerment and fostering and building those collaborative relationships. That's an area in May that you really expressed as a board we'd like to continue, and we kind of spoke about that idea about greater involvement and understanding. So understanding what's happening here and vice versa, but abilities to connect and try to put our finger on how do we do a better job of bringing community in and connecting to that work. And not that we don't have celebrations, but we have room to grow. And if you think about it, beyond last year, for the previous 3, we don't want them here and send everybody home. So we're really,
Yeah.
and the Chamber of Commerce similarly, we're trying to rebuild those connections
Yes.
around community. So it really needs to be a focus point. So those are the ideas around measures that we would have, to include some survey opportunities. And we use the word focus group, but whatever the focus area is, maybe it's about bond or communication. If you recall, we brought people in, tried to gather their feedback, make sure we're really listening and responding with that feedback. So those are some ideas of how we might measure that.
One of the things I wanted to add is that I really appreciate that you have meaningful up there. And I was actually thinking about that over and over again in goal 1, is that one of the things we heard from Cliff is that the high school kids want to know, is this academics meaningful, okay? And we know that when there's meaning for us, we're more involved. When there's meaning for kids, they're more involved. So if we can make sure that some of the academics are also meaningful, it's going to boost the enthusiasm and the activity.
I think that meaningful is key and purposeful in our addition
Or
of that
that would be
language.
another one, yes, yes.
Because we
yes.
don't want that to just become to a football game.
Yeah, yeah.
Are we capturing your voice as it
Right,
pertains to the
right.
education of your child? Are you giving us feedback on our
Right.
district progress and our goals?
Right,
Are we listening to and responding to your wants and desires? Because that's where that partnership is really reflected. So I appreciate you calling attention to it. Goal 3, whole child, again, that goal doesn't change. But what's the point of it, and how does agency and dignity connect? That's our best stab at what we would do to define that and set that goal as a target. The self-regulate, the self-advocate are 2 ideas that we've talked about before in that front. And how do we access and use community partners to help on those preventative measures? Because if you're going to really improve those outcomes, you need to decrease the risk factors and increase the protective factors. Chris Willis talked to you about that over the last couple of years, actually, of our work in that regard, and the point of these partners. So those are ideas of how we would measure that through the quantitative. If you remember Healthy Youth Survey, we not only were able to access a tremendous amount of local funding, but that was a big portion of what comes back and is reported to you. So we think things like that are continue to play a role. The panorama data really helped us lean into some of not only uncovering what some of those challenges are. If you remember our kids' grit and perseverance, they were very in the low category last year. And so using those ideas to connect to what are the needs of our kids and what is that data telling us. On the qualitative side, character strong, focus groups, feedback from kids is what we're doing, working, meeting your needs. Again, the idea of portfolios, like we'd be able to bring a list or measures of how we're capturing voice and giving feedback and adjusting what we're doing based on that. We included professional development as well. If you remember, Cliff did that survey with his kids around dignity and then surveyed staff and brought those 2 back together and then trying to work together to make not only a goal area, but he's incorporating staff meetings. Aaron came in mid-year and did targeted PD based on the feedback. It's kind of that idea that we'd be able to stitch those together of how we would show through a qualitative lens. Student support, we've talked about that NTSS intervention system quite a bit. Really, that's a big leverage on the equity. So whether your need is academic, and we have the ESY that you described, or social-emotional, we have that ability to not only measure, but use those systems that bring us together and leverage that change for the child. So that's kind of the thought about how to incorporate agency and dignity in that idea. Qualitative and qualitative measures, those are kind of mostly similar to what we have already in the last strategic plan. And we shared a lot of those measures or data points with you in May. We think those continue to a large degree, just getting a little bit more targeted and purposeful with connecting the needs and the interventions and supports. Our goal last year really went from having no clear intervention systems in several places to actually building and putting those in place. And moving on that's not the goal anymore, is actually having an intervention system. Is it working?
Yes.
For whom and how do we know? And if not, or if so, how do we replicate and or lean into what's not working? So that would be some ideas of where I think this next year would go. So I'll just pause there for a moment and gather some additional feedback. I already got some good notes. Those are our big ideas. I hope they reflect some of the values and conversations that you've had. If there's a missing hole or chunk, that doesn't even have to come up tonight, because we don't see this again until August 17th. But if you could share that feedback with myself, Cabinet will take that, look at any revisions, and then we'll work with Brittany to bring a final draft of a 23-26 plan. I'll talk about next steps in a moment, but on a first blush, happy to entertain any questions, or what about this, or I don't know what this means. And then I'll move on and just hit next steps real quick.
I'm just glad that we're doing quantitative and qualitative. So many times people think that the only kind of data that's useful is numerical, when anecdotal data is particularly valuable because you get concrete, specific information, and it's still data even if it is not numerical.
I think that qualitative allows you to build celebrations and wins along the way. We don't want
That's data too.
the thing where we can't celebrate till next year's SBA scores, and then it's, oh, it's really good, or oh, it's not so good. So what do you tell and do along the way? And so I think that's the relevancy of that. Plus, I mean, how many times have we at board meetings been almost in tears based on the testimony of what kids are seeing and doing, or the staff are seeing and doing? We don't want to lose that in our strategic work, I don't think. That would be a misstep.
I think that in our staff agency, I like that idea, and it improves the performance for academics. I think that we really need to look at staff members that are really doing a good job at that and are having a lot of success in their classroom, and using them with other staff members, because that right there would be an example of staff agency. And you know, if you can get those results, you can see, okay, this is really working. These staff members are doing something that's really working. And I know they talk about that in PLCs, but I'm talking about in a broader sense, like for using them a day a week for a coach or something, that showing how they're doing, what they're doing is actually making a difference. So.
Learning walks, I think part of our kickoff is about the vision of what does a high agency classroom look like and sound like. If you remember George Couros, he painted a picture between school and learning, and we were really excited about the learning idea, and I think that's some of what we've got in light of this direction forward. What does learning look like and sound like in Warding? And then how is our professional development, our walkthroughs, our coaching, how are all those things working in service and support of that vision?
Right.
And that's where I think we need to get a little bit tighter to really have it leverage in the instructional core, because what your average teacher, don't give me 3 different frameworks, 82 separate bullets, and try to, what's the nucleus of what's important, and let's hedge on that. And I think if we can get there with our advance, we'll be much more likely to do some of the things you're talking about.
It's so much nicer for new teachers, because it helps them so much. I mean, I always learn from other teachers, and then it makes it more equitable too, when a student's being placed in 5th grade, under 4th grade, or whatever, it's like, you can say, hey, across the board. So.
The other thing is, if there's some way to remember that PD doesn't have to be one size fits all, because what one teacher needs is not the same as somebody else. And so many times you're afraid to say, I really like to learn about, because you don't want your evaluator to go, oh, let me write that down about you. When it's just an honest, hey, I want to get better at that.
I just in the simplest terms appreciate that you're continuing to iterate on the goals and updating. I mean, word choice matters, and so I appreciate that. I don't think I have any questions or changes on the quantitative or qualitative measures. Just as I mentioned, I would love to show patterns of improvement, we like patterns. Even if we don't like the pattern,
Right.
you know, what are we doing to affect
Yeah.
it? So, yeah, keep going, so would be my feedback.
You saw a taste in May, and we got your feedback about the measures that we have and what's been working. And I think many of these pieces, we can build off of that previous year to tell that story on a longitudinal way. Some of our next steps that we would have, assuming this is good, we want to bring a final draft back to you for a thumbs up in the form of a strategic plan. And then we'll begin to re-communicate that, whether you want to do a launch video or how do you want to put that out there. We'll talk about that. We'll replace what's out here. We want to really lay in August the groundwork. So now that we have kind of a thumbs up, because this will happen before we see you, we'll want to work with our leaders to lean into those identified problems of practice related to these 4 goal areas. And then thinking through the qualitative, quantitative lens, what's your initial idea about how you're going to not only engage staff, engage kids, engage families in the conversation, but along the way, what are multiple ways that you can measure, thinking about those qualitative and quantitative lenses. So we want to try to keep their focus under this broader umbrella to a very targeted way, and then make sure we have a clear way of how we're going to look at evidence along the way to not only measure progress at the end, but along the way, so we can tell those stories. So that common vision, high agency, dignity classroom, that's part of that, and that's certainly going to involve conversations with our staff, both from the evaluation 5D lens and the collaboration PLC lens. We want to get tighter around our expectations around PLC, so if we're focusing on agency, we all know what that looks like and sounds like, and how are we going to hold ourselves accountable in that collaborative work to do so. You'll see that revised strategic plan in August, and then we'll build our school improvement plans from that. So I would still probably guess that December timeframe, maybe November, but we'll have the bond surfacing and a couple things happening. So no later than December board work session, you'll see those strategic plans that they should be able to speak to. Here's our core focus areas in each of these goals. Here's our measures. Here's how we've involved stakeholders. And here's what you can expect to see or hear as progress when we come back to you in the board work session. Mind you, not all those goals are done in January, February, but you saw a pretty good update of work done so far. That was exciting everywhere we went. So if you have any other feedback that pops up, I'll say in the next 2.5 weeks or so, please share my way. Happy to set up a 2x2, that kind of thing. And then once we lock it in with Miss Brittany, she'll finalize all those touches, and we'll be ready to share that back in August on the 17th.
Just one feedback, one of our challenges in communication is all of the acronyms and language that makes perfect sense to us, but no sense to our community and our parents. And so as this starts to roll out, just keep it simple.
We're gonna have to think, there's acronyms in here and things that people don't know what they mean, and so we'll have to think about how we.
My friend says, don't talk teacherese to me.
Yes, trees.
Yeah, that was some of our conversation as cabinet, like, people aren't gonna know what this means. But also, how long do you want it to be?
Right.
Panorama is a survey, this is administered twice a year, you know,
Just a
so.
link, just lots of links.
Yeah, so we'll think about how to just not be
Footnotes.
verbose. Yes.
Yeah,
One
but,
thing, when you're doing the professional development and things, and your meetings at schools and things, I would love it if we could think a little bit more about how that impacts special ed, and is special ed getting anything out of what's being said today? Because sometimes they might need something a little different than just, you know, what's happening at that meeting at that time. And so having it meaningful for them too, I think is important, because otherwise, you know, you can be sitting at a meeting that's, just like you said, it's not as, they're still interested in it, but it doesn't really pertain to them like it does the other teachers, so. I don't know what that looks like, but you might come up with something.
Not sure yet, but I am sure that these ideas can apply to every child under our care. So that's the wrestle.
Yeah.
What does it look like from pre-K all the way up to an age 21-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And how do we know and how do we develop and grow it? Okay, that concludes the presentation on strategic plan. Thank you. The cabinet, hopefully you got some good notes, and then we'll come back to the table and make some revisions based on your feedback and have a final draft for your consideration in August.
Alrighty. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is first reading of policy considerations. I did not see any conversation about these policies. I thought the procedure for staff expression was interesting, but I did not have any changes or anything to it, or edits that I saw were necessary. I kind of like, just commentary on it, I kind of felt like when I read it, that some of our other policies about how we interact with each other and how we support students and community, that this was a little redundant in some ways, but it's nice to have it spelled out clearly.
Better to be redundant than confusing.
Yes, yeah, it's easy to refer back to and read.
Yes.
Were there any other comments or anything? Okay. Very good. Now we are at the consent agenda. I would love to hear a motion.
Motion to approve items 1 through 8 on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. You've become this floating head in our
I know,
faculty.
it's
I just want to make sure you're okay.
Have a swing.
All right, then we have some action items. So the first one is resolution number 9, 2022-2023, debt service and general fund to the capital projects fund transfer. So,
I motion to move to approve resolution number 9, 2022 to 23, debt service and general fund to the capital projects fund transfer.
thank you. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. You good, Mike?
Aye.
Thank you. The next one is resolution number 10.2022-2023, study and survey.
I move to approve resolution number 10.2022-2023, study and survey.
Second?
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. And then our fees and fines schedule for 2023-2024.
I don't have any questions, but I did just want to quickly comment before the motion on this one, is that I noticed the fees stayed relatively very low. If there was any increase, and there were some things that were off there, and I just want to compliment the district once again at making sure that the fees that we're charging for students and families is very minimal.
And I wanted to comment and say I appreciate that we're right out up front with, this is how we decide if you don't have to pay for it, and that information is out there rather than somebody have to go and ask that.
With that said, I move to approve the 23-24 fees and fine schedule and meal pricing as presented.
I second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And the next item is minimum basic education requirement compliance with OSPI.
Move to approve the 23-24 minimum basic education requirement compliance.
Can I get a second?
I second it.
Any discussion? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. And now I'll open up the floor
they do with the little block, the old turf things that they picked up, you know?
You
The
know,
little,
the existing pellets on the previous field are underneath the new turf field. So that is the path. So they cut a 2-foot swath around the whole edge to blend in the transition from the track, so you don't really notice an elevation increase. So the old turf field is underneath, the new turf field is on top. The edges were cut all around and a transition blended a base of gravel. The new pellets and sand are mixed in there. And the goal is to be about 3/4 of an inch from the very top of the fiber to where that substrate is of sand and rubber.
so nothing went on the gravel road?
That's a different question.
Okay, that's the question I'm going for.
That's a different question. Yes, there was, by a subcontractor, an erroneous, I wouldn't call it disposal, but the way they were blowing the rubber went into the storm drain and the drainage ditch adjacent to the field. That led to a stop work order by the city of Boarding.
Oh,
That drainage, the company did a cleanup, put in filters and all the catch basins, met with the city again to get a resumed work order, that was approved. Those catch basins, though, were probably presumed to feed Carbon or Puyallup or some storm drain. Those feed the actual collect basin on the back of Portage Middle School. So they don't go to raw water anywhere discharged. That went back into our storm drain that we have feeding that on site pond. That said, it still led to a work stoppage and a work reduction as soon as a cleanup and mitigation plan were put in place and approved by city inspectors.
so paving it wouldn't have been better then?
No, in this particular case, paving that road wouldn't be better, but I would still advocate that we pave that.
That's what I was like.
Connected to a wall.
Well, actually, my only question and comment tonight is, so who is legally responsible for maintenance for
The
that
city.
little alley gravel dirt?
It's the city.
City if they own it, us if we own it,
They own
I
it.
think it's the
but
city.
they own that road,
They own it.
yes.
I just wondered because have you ever driven on it?
Yes, I'm trying to, that's what our point was, it's like,
Yes.
well, maybe they should just. Yeah.
But no, the pellets and the paving
Okay.
didn't quite connect.
Okay.
There was an issue.
Oh, I was just wondering if maybe they connected and that made it better. They had to pick it then, so. but- Guess not. So, I just know that it's so lucky.
Or maintain it.
Yeah, our meeting.
I know.
I was taking again the note about focus groups. We could do a student pickup line focus group while they're all waiting there. That could be-
Oh, yeah.
Just pop out that.
And move that yellow pole,
Yeah.
because everyone runs into it.
Some more than once.
My comment is that I've been enjoying the little break, and I hope everybody else has been too, before it gets busy again, so. Everybody keeps enjoying their summer.
No more comments? Mike?
We had comments all throughout, this was a very talkative meeting.
Yep, that was good. I'll go home and go over. All right. No, it's all good. Okay, then with that, I will adjourn tonight's meeting at